Welcome you all. So in this session, we are going to discuss about low pressure die casting process. So first, let us see what is permanent mold casting. Then we will move on to low pressure die casting process. So permanent mold die casting process is a process for producing a large number of casting using a single reusable mold. So we already discussed about the sand casting process, investment casting process, and shell molding process. So in those processes, we use the expandable mold, which means once the solidification of the casting is done, the mold will be destroyed. Mold will be destroyed and we cannot reuse it. Whereas in permanent mold casting, the mold can be used many number of times and the more casting can be made using a single reusable mold. And here the process is very simple. The molten metal is poured into the permanent mold. Once it cools, the mold will be separated and the pot will be taken out. And here the mold is made up of high melting point material. So most of the time we use cast iron and the alloy steel for producing the permanent mold. And here the main advantage of permanent mold casting is the metals, okay, the parts which are made from the permanent mold casting will have the better dimensional tolerance, superior surface finish, and high, high and more uniform mechanical properties. So these are the main advantage of permanent mold casting. For this only we go for the permanent mold casting. And not only that, it also has the high strength, toughness, and ductility owing to the mold walls rapidly removing heat from the liquid metal. So on here we can see you can see the classification of casting based on how the molten metal is filled the mold cavity. Okay, it can be filled through two ways. Okay, one is by gravity and by pressure. Okay. Under the category of gravity, it has been separated, it has been divided into two types. One is the expandable mold and another one is the permanent mold. So expandable mold means the mold will be used only once. So once the casting is done, the mold is destroyed. Okay. So under this category, we have sand molds, graphite molds, plaster molds, ceramic molds, and last foam process. In all the five processes, the mold is used only once. And now, if you want to produce or if you want to make a casting, then you have to make a mold. For every casting, okay, we have to prepare a separate mold. Okay, so that is expandable mold. So under the category of permanent mold, we have the gravity die casting, semi-continuous casting, and continuous casting. So under the category of by pressure, so in this case, the molten metal is fed into the mold cavity under pressure. So here the molten metal is injected into the mold cavity at high pressure, okay, under the pressure, under some pressure. So it may be a low pressure or it may be a high pressure, but here the molten metal is sent into the die cavity by pressure. Okay. So under this category, we have low pressure die casting, high pressure die casting, and vacuum assisted die casting process, and squeeze casting, and semi-solid casting, then centrifugal casting. So all these five or six processes are also comes under the permanent mold casting. For low pressure die casting, high pressure die casting, squeeze casting, semi-solid, and centrifugal casting processes, we use permanent mold. Okay, so what are the main advantages of permanent mold? The pot can be made with better dimensional tolerance, and the pot will be having superior surface finish, and the parts which are made from permanent mold casting will be having uniform mechanical properties. So for these reasons, only we go for the permanent mold casting. Okay, now let us see what is the low pressure die casting process. So from the name itself, from the title itself, we can understand what is low pressure die casting process. So in the previous lecture, we discussed about the high pressure die casting process. In that process, the molten metal is injected into the mold cavity under high pressure. Okay, so in this case, the molten metal is fed into the injected into the die cavity low pressure. So in the low pressure die casting process, is normally used for casting aluminum and magnesium based alloys. So here also it is not made for the high melting point alloys like steel, titanium kind of materials. Okay, so this process is also designed for the low melting point alloys like aluminum and magnesium based alloys. So the melting point of aluminum and magnesium based alloys is less than 660 degrees Celsius. So we can use this process. Then in this process, the permanent mold is used. Okay, so here you can see. So this is the schematic diagram, schematic representation of a low pressure die casting process. And so this is the die setup. Okay, and this is the die setup, and below the die setup we have a furnace, and inside the furnace we have a crucible. Okay, so the crucible is containing the molten metal is so this is the molten metal. The crucible is containing the molten metal. Okay. So here, so it's just like a hot chamber die casting process. Okay, here the mold, the die, as well as the furnace is an integral part. Okay, so the die and the crucible or the furnace is connected by means of a ceramic tube. So this is a ceramic tube. So here you can see. So this is the ceramic tube, and one end of the ceramic tube is connected with the mold, and the another end is immersed into the molten metal. Okay, and this is the furnace. So this molten metal is always under a particular temperature. And here we have a provision for applying the pressurized air. So at the initial stage, the pressure inside the furnace and inside the mold cavity is same. Okay. So now the pressurized air is sent into the mold cavity, so into the furnace. Okay, now what will happen is the pressure inside the furnace is higher than the pressure inside the mold cavity. So there is a pressure gradient. So we all know that if there is a pressure difference, the liquid will flow from high pressure region to low pressure region. So that's what happening in low pressure die casting process. Okay, so this is the ceramic tube. One end is connected to the mold, and another is connected, another is immersed into the molten metal. So because of the pressure difference, due to the pressure gradient, the molten metal is rises and it is flows into the mold cavity. So once the mold cavity is completely filled, the pressurized air that is sent into the furnace will be cut off. Okay, will be removed, so that excess molten metal that is available available inside the ceramic tube will flows back into the crucible. Okay, so here the molten metal is filled into the die cavity with less turbulence, and it is filled slowly. Okay, so that the turbulence is avoided. Hence, we will get a quality casting without any defect. So that is the main advantage of low pressure die casting process that cannot be achieved in the high pressure die casting process. High pressure die casting process, the molten metal is injected into the die with high pressure. So if the pressure is high means then there will be a high turbulence. The turbulence is very high means then there will be a poor surface finish, and surface finish as well as there is a chance for the defects, casting defects. So that is avoided by means of the low pressure die casting process. And the another advantage of the low pressure die casting process is the close tolerance castings can be made. Okay, now the casting is the mold cavity is filled with the molten metal. Okay, so now the solidification is completed. So how the solidified part will be taken out. So that's what we are going to see now. So here, so this is the mold. Can this mold contain three parts? Okay, the left half. Okay, this is the left half, and this one is the right half, and this one is the top. So these three parts. Okay, so now the left and the right lower die halves will be removed. Okay, and the top portion. Okay, this top die half will be removed. Okay, the molten metal is attached with the top part because of this shrinkage. because of the shrinkage. And with the help of the ejector pin, the solidified part will be removed. From the top there. After that, the post processing will be done. Post processing will be done. So this is how the pot is being made with low pressure die casting process. Thank you.